The second the doctor studied my blood test and his face lost all color, I felt it in my chest that something was seriously wrong. He walked out of the room without explaining anything. From the other side of the glass, I saw him making a phone call, his fingers pressed to his temple as if he was trying to understand something that made no sense. About 10 minutes later, 3 senior doctors filled the small emergency room and looked at me like I didn't belong. In the real world, not with sympathy, not with worry, with pure shock. My name is Ethan Cole. I am 38 years old. 3 months before that night, I was scrubbing toilets and mopping floors at the same hospital for minimum pay. I wore a dull blue uniform with my name stitched on it. I pushed a cleaning cart through long corridors where no one ever noticed me. I didn't exist. I was nothing. I was a man whose unfaithful wife and her rich lover had carefully torn apart everything I spent 15 years building.
I used to be a lead civil engineer.
I earned over $200,000 a year. I designed structures meant to last generations. I owned a quiet home outside the city, had savings for retirement, and believed my future was secure. Then my wife Laura decided I no longer met her standards. She chose a venture capitalist named Marcus Reed, a man with a luxury yacht and more money than sense. She didn't just walk away from me. She helped him destroy my career. One phone call after another, doors closed. I was fired without explanation and quietly blocked from every firm in the area. I watched my bank account disappear while Laura took the house and half of what remained. On my first night working as a janitor, she sent me a picture of herself, smiling on Marcus's yacht, somewhere in the Caribbean. The message below the photo had just 2 words that still ring in my ears. Enjoy nothing. So there I was, 3 months into my new life as the man who cleans bathrooms, sitting on a hospital bed with 16 stitches in my hand, after a shattered light bulb cut me open. Blood soaked through my uniform. I had lost enough to worry the nurses, so they ran tests. It was routine for an injury that bad. I expected bad news, anemia, diabetes, maybe something worse. A part of me almost wished it was fatal. At least then the fight would be finished. But when the doctor came back, Dr. Aaron Delgado came back with the 3 specialists. They closed the door and pulled chairs close to my bed, like they were preparing to deliver news that would break me. That was when I understood this was not a normal medical issue. The head of the genetics unit sat beside me and asked a question that felt completely out of place. Mr. Cole, was your father adopted? I told her yes, Daniel Cole had been adopted as a baby in 1952. He never knew who his real parents were. He never looked for them. He died believing the past was better left untouched. She nodded slowly as if confirming something she already knew. Then she spoke again. She mentioned a name known across Pennsylvania, a name tied to steel companies, towering buildings and billions donated to charities. A name that belonged to one of the richest families America had ever seen. According to my genetic results, I was the biological grandson of Henry Blackstone. Henry Blackstone had passed away 2 months earlier at the age of 94. His fortune was valued at more than $9 billion. Officially, he had no living heirs. His only son had died many years ago without children, or so the public believed. But the truth was different. His son had a child in secret, a baby boy given up quietly to protect the family's reputation. That baby was my father, and that meant I was the only living heir to everything. The room felt like it was spinning. My stitched hand throbbed with pain. A loud ringing filled my ears, making it hard to focus on the doctor's next words. 3 months earlier, my unfaithful wife had told me to enjoy being poor. That night in the emergency room, bleeding through my uniform, I learned that poverty was about to disappear from my life, and payback was suddenly within reach. For 15 years, I thought I was living the American dream. I woke up every morning at 6, kissed my wife on the forehead, and drove 45 minutes into downtown Philadelphia. I worked as a senior structural engineer at Carson & Myers, one of the largest engineering firms on the East Coast. We designed hospitals, universities, and corporate offices, buildings meant to last long after we were gone. I took pride in that work. I took pride in the career I had built from nothing. My income increased year after year until it reached $218,000 annually. I had a corner office overlooking the skyline. I managed a team of young engineers who trusted and respected me. My performance reviews described me as outstanding and essential. I believed I had earned my place through discipline and effort. My wife Claire and I met during our junior year at Penn State. She was studying business while I was buried in engineering textbooks. She was confident, ambitious, and always chasing something bigger. Being around her made you believe success was inevitable. When she looked at me and said I was destined for something great, I believed her. I wanted to become the man she already thought I was. We married 2 years after finishing college. It was a quiet wedding. A simple ceremony followed by a small reception with only family and close friends. My mother, Evelyn, cried through most of it. My father, Robert, shook my hand afterward and told me how proud he was of the man I had become. That was the last moment I can remember when my life felt truly calm and complete. My father died when I was 26. A sudden heart attack, no warning at all. He was 61 and had spent his entire adult life working in a steel factory. Starting when he was just 18, his hands were thick and scarred from decades of hard labor. Yet he never complained. He believed honest work carried its own dignity, that a man was shaped by what he endured quietly, without applause. Robert had been adopted as a baby. He never knew who his biological parents were, and never tried to find them. When I once asked if it bothered him, he simply said the people who raised you were your real family. Blood to him was just biology. Love was what mattered. I accepted that answer and didn't press further. Now I wish I had. I wish I had asked more, listened harder, understood what history he carried without knowing it himself. After my father passed, my mother became the emotional center of our family. She had worked as a nurse at a major Philadelphia hospital for 3 decades before retiring. She was petite, with soft gray hair and eyes that could catch a lie before it was spoken. She never fully trusted my wife, Anna. Her comments sounded polite on the surface, but there was always something sharp underneath. She cares more about what you could become than who you are, she once told me after a dinner, where Anna spent the whole evening talking about money. I brushed it off as typical tension between a mother and a daughter-in-law. I told myself no one was ever good enough for a mother's son, and that eventually she would come around. I also had a younger brother, Mark, who lived in Chicago with his wife, Lena, and their 2 children. We spoke every few weeks, mostly about sports or family updates, but we were never especially close. Our lives ran side by side without overlapping much. My world revolved around 2 things, my career and my marriage. I gave everything to both. Late nights, weekends at the office, constant deadlines. I took Anna on the trips she wanted, bought her gifts on anniversaries, surprised her with flowers just because I believed I was building something that would last. I thought that if I worked hard enough and loved her deeply enough, we would grow old together like my parents had. The first signs of trouble appeared about 2 years before everything fell apart. Anna moved from commercial real estate into high-end luxury properties. She began attending exclusive events, private showings in penthouses worth more than I would earn in a decade. She started coming home late. Her conversations became fixated on wealth, status, and the lives of people who had more than we did. I noticed the shift but convinced myself it was temporary. Ambition, career growth, nothing to fear. I trusted her completely because I had never been given a reason not to. I believed in our marriage the same way I believed in the buildings. I designed strong, permanent, built to endure. I was wrong about all of it. And I was about to learn just how wrong I had been. The night I learned the truth about Claire, I came home early from work with a pounding headache. The house was silent when I stepped inside. Her car was parked outside, but when I called her name, she didn't respond. I went upstairs planning to take some medicine and lie down in the dark. That was when I heard her voice coming from our bedroom. She was laughing. It was a light, playful laugh, the kind she hadn't used with me in years. I stopped outside the door and listened. She was on the phone. "He has no idea," she said. "He's so busy with his little designs and calculations that he doesn't notice anything. I could leave tomorrow and he probably wouldn't even realize until dinner time." My chest tightened. I slowly pushed the door open. She was stretched out on our bed wearing a satin robe, her phone held to her ear, smiling. When she saw me, her face drained of color for a brief moment. Then she composed herself and told the person on the line she would call back. "How long were you standing there?" she asked. "Long enough," I said. She didn't apologize. She didn't deny anything. She just sighed, as if I were a problem she was tired of dealing with. "His name is Daniel Cross," she said. "He's a client. We've been together about 8 months. 8 months. She said it like it meant nothing. Like she was mentioning a subscription she forgot to cancel. My legs felt weak, and I grabbed the doorframe to keep from falling. "Why?" I asked. She stood up and walked toward her closet, speaking calmly, as if we were planning a grocery list. "Because Daniel is going somewhere, Ethan. He's worth $60 million. He flies me to Paris for the weekend. He introduces me to people who matter. You take me to chain restaurants and talk about load limits and stress points." I wanted to shout. I wanted to break something. Instead, I stood there frozen, while the woman I had loved for 15 years dismantled our marriage with cold indifference. "I want a divorce," she said. "I've already talked to a lawyer." The next 3 months were the darkest of my life. Claire moved into Daniel's luxury penthouse while our attorneys battled over everything I owned. She demanded the house. She wanted half my retirement savings. She even asked for spousal support, claiming her career had suffered because she supported my ambitions. The cruelty of that claim made my head spin. I had stood by her through every career change, every certification course, every networking event that kept her out until midnight, and now somehow I was the one who had held her back. But losing money was nothing compared to what happened next. 3 weeks after Claire filed for divorce, I was called into the office of Jonathan Pierce, the CEO of my firm. Jonathan was a tall man with silver hair and an emotionless stare. He had built Pierce Engineering from the ground up and ruled it like a private empire where his word was final. "Sit down, Ethan," he said. I took the chair across from his desk while he shuffled papers and avoided looking at me. "We're restructuring the engineering division. Your position has been eliminated effective immediately. Human resources will handle your severance and collect your access badge." It felt like a punch to the gut. Eliminated. "Jonathan, I've been here 15 years, I said. "My evaluations have always been excellent. I completed the Riverside Medical Complex 2 months ahead of schedule." He finally met my eyes, and in that moment I knew this had nothing to do with my work. "The decision has already been made," he said flatly. "Security will escort you to your office so you can collect your personal items." Later I learned the truth. Daniel Cross had financial stakes in several construction companies that regularly worked with Pierce Engineering. He also played golf with Jonathan Pierce every Sunday at a private country club outside the city. Daniel had made calls. He had spoken quietly to the right people. Destroying my marriage hadn't been enough. He wanted my career gone too. The severance package was a joke. 8 weeks of pay for 15 years of loyalty. My lawyer told me I could fight it, but the legal fees would cost more than I could ever win back. The system favored people who could afford to wait years for justice. I couldn't afford to wait even a month to pay rent. I applied to every engineering firm within 100 miles. I sent resumes, made calls, and reached out to old colleagues and professional contacts. The responses were always the same. Polite rejection emails, positions that suddenly disappeared, interviews that ended with promises to follow up that never happened. I didn't understand why until a former coworker, Jason Miller, invited me out for a drink and finally told me the truth. "Daniel Cross has been calling people," he said. "He's telling them you're hard to work with, that you were let go because of performance issues. No one wants to take the risk." I had been blacklisted, wiped out of an industry I had given my entire adult life to, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Within 6 months, I went from a corner office overlooking the skyline to a tiny studio apartment in Kensington, one of the toughest neighborhoods in Philadelphia. The apartment was barely 400 square feet, with dark watermarks on the ceiling and metal bars covering the windows. I could hear my neighbors arguing through walls so thin they felt useless. Sirens screamed through the night, and I learned to sleep with a pillow pressed over my ears. My savings disappeared faster than I ever imagined. Rent, groceries, electricity, car payments, insurance. No matter how many times I did the math, it never added up. I sold my watch, my golf clubs, and anything that wasn't necessary to stay alive. Even that wasn't enough. My mother called me every day. She begged me to move back in with her, but I refused. She was 72, living on Social Security and a small pension. Her house was modest and her health was fragile. I wouldn't become another weight on her shoulders. "I'm okay, Mom," I told her every time. "I just need some time." The truth was I wasn't okay at all. I was sinking. The only job I could get was working nights as a janitor at City Memorial Hospital. Minimum wage, $11.50 an hour to mop floors. scrub toilets, empty trash, and clean things that made my stomach turn. The irony wasn't lost on me. My mother had worked in that same hospital for 30 years as a respected nurse. Now her son pushed a mop bucket through those halls like someone who didn't exist. I worked from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. The hospital never truly slept, but nights had their own lonely rhythm. I moved through hallways where doctors and nurses rushed past without looking at me. I was invisible, just another man in a gray uniform with a name tag no one bothered to read. The shame was crushing. I had spent my adult life building a career I was proud of. I had designed buildings meant to last decades. Now I was cleaning bathrooms for less money than I once spent on a single dinner out with my wife. The night she sent that message, I was on my hands and knees wiping up a spill in the emergency waiting area. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I checked it and saw her name. Against my better judgment, I opened it. It was a photo of Rachel and Logan standing on a yacht. Blue ocean stretched behind them. She wore a white bikini and oversized sunglasses, leaning against him with a glass of champagne in her hand. They looked like a perfect advertisement for a life I no longer belonged to. Beneath the picture were the words that burned into my mind. Enjoy being poor. You should have aimed higher. I stared at the message for a long time. Something inside me cracked, not shattered. There is a difference. Breaking means quitting. Cracking means something is starting to move. I didn't reply. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and finished cleaning the floor. Then I went back to work. Because work was the only thing I could still control. Show up, do the job, make it through another day. 3 months passed in a haze of exhaustion and repetition. I lost 20 pounds because I couldn't afford real meals. I stopped calling friends because I had nothing left to say. I lived inside a constant fog of despair that grew heavier with each passing day. The night everything changed began like any other shift. I was replacing a burnt-out light in a storage room near the emergency department. The bulb was jammed, and as I twisted harder, the glass exploded in my hand. Pain shot through my arm instantly. Blood streamed from my palm and wrist where sharp shards had cut deep. I stumbled backward and knocked over a shelf filled with supplies. The crash drew a nurse into the room. She found me slumped against the wall, pressing a cloth to my hand while blood soaked through it. I felt dizzy. The room spun around me. She called for help, and suddenly I wasn't the janitor anymore. I was being rushed into the emergency room as a patient. They laid me on a bed and began treating my hand. A young doctor named Adrian Morales examined the wounds and told me I would need stitches. 16 of them, it turned out. He spoke calmly, professionally, with eyes that actually saw me instead of looking past me. You lost a fair amount of blood, he said as he worked. We're going to run some tests just to be safe. Standard procedure for an injury like this. I nodded and let him continue. I assumed they would check iron levels, maybe screen for infection. Routine things. I had no idea that a simple blood test was about to expose a secret buried for nearly 40 years. Dr. Morales finished stitching my hand and told me to rest while they waited for the lab results. I lay there in my blood-stained work uniform, staring at the ceiling. I thought about my father, Robert, and how he used to say that hard times shaped a man. I wondered what he would think if he could see me like this. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to learn things about my father that would change everything. I believed about my family, my blood, and my place in the world. Dr. Morales came back about an hour later, and this time he wasn't alone. 2 other doctors followed him into the room, both wearing expressions I couldn't understand. They stood at the foot of my bed and exchanged looks, like they were silently deciding who should speak first. Mr. Cole, we noticed some irregularities in your blood tests, Dr. Morales said carefully. I've asked a few colleagues to review your results. My heart dropped. I immediately assumed the worst: cancer, leukemia, some rare condition that would be the final blow to an already ruined life. A small part of me almost felt calm. At least it would be over. Just tell me, I said. Whatever it is, I can handle it. Dr. Morales shook his head. This isn't what you're thinking. It's not an illness. We found some unusual genetic markers in your blood, markers that triggered an alert in our system. Before I could ask what that meant, the door opened again. An older woman stepped inside wearing a white coat. She had sharp eyes behind thin glasses and a presence that immediately made the others move aside. Mr. Cole, I'm Dr. Margaret Lawson, she said. I head the genetics department here. I'm sorry to interrupt, but what we found in your blood work is highly unusual.
She pulled a chair close to my bed and sat down.
The other doctors stayed standing, watching me closely. My skin prickled under their attention. "I need to ask you a few questions about your family history," Dr. Lawson said. "Specifically about your father. Was he adopted?" The question surprised me. "Yes," I said. "He was adopted as a baby in 1952. He never knew who his biological parents were." She nodded slowly, as if that answer confirmed something. "Did he ever try to find them? Any documents, records, or information at all?" "No," I replied. "He wasn't interested. He always said the people who raised you were your real family." She paused, then leaned forward and spoke gently but with purpose. "Mr. Cole, your blood contains genetic markers we've seen only once before in our entire database. These markers are linked to a very specific family line, a family whose medical records have been in our system for decades due to their significant financial support of this hospital." My mouth went dry. "What family?" "The Blackwood family." The name hit me like a punch. Everyone in Pennsylvania knew the Blackwoods. Samuel Blackwood had built a steel empire in the early 20th century, becoming one of the richest men in the country. The Blackwood Trust had donated hundreds of millions to hospitals, universities, and charities nationwide. Their name appeared on buildings, scholarships, and research centers across the state. Samuel Blackwood had died 2 months earlier at the age of 94. His death dominated the news for weeks, largely because he left behind an estate valued at more than $9 billion. But there was a major problem with the inheritance, one that lawyers and reporters had been arguing about ever since. Blackwood had no living heirs. His only son, Thomas Blackwood, died in a car crash in 1985. Thomas never married and officially had no children. That was the story everyone knew. When Samuel Blackwood died, his will stated that his entire fortune would pass to any biological descendants. If none were found, the money would be divided among several charities. Dr. Lawson watched my face as the truth slowly formed in my mind. "Mr. Cole," she said, "based on your genetic profile, you are the biological grandson of Samuel Blackwood. Your father, Robert, was the undocumented son of Thomas Blackwood. He was born in 1952 as the result of a hidden relationship between Thomas and a woman who worked on the family estate. The pregnancy was concealed, and the child was placed for adoption to protect the family's public image." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I could barely breathe. "That's impossible," I whispered. "My father was nobody. He worked in a factory his entire life. He had no money, no influence. He never knew who he really was," Dr. Lawson said gently. "The adoption records were sealed. The Blackwood family ensured that. But DNA doesn't lie. We ran the analysis 3 times. You are Thomas Blackwood's grandson, and that makes you the only surviving heir to the Blackwood estate." The weeks that followed were chaos. Lawyers, court filings, DNA confirmations, and non-stop media attention consumed my life. The Blackwood Trust's legal team fought my claim at first. They had spent months preparing to distribute the fortune according to Samuel's charitable plans. A hospital janitor suddenly appearing as a lost heir sounded unbelievable, but the proof was overwhelming. 3 independent labs confirmed my genetic link to the Blackwood bloodline. Family historians traced my father's adoption back to a Catholic orphanage in Pittsburgh that had received large donations from the Blackwood family in 1952, the same year my father was born and quietly given away. The legal battle lasted 6 weeks. In the end, the court ruled in my favor. The will was clear. Any biological descendant inherited everything. On a cold Thursday afternoon in Pittsburgh, I sat in a conference room filled with attorneys and officially accepted my inheritance, $9.4 billion. When I walked outside, the winter air burned my face. My phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "Ethan, I saw the news. Congratulations. I always knew you were special. Maybe we should talk. I miss you." It was from Claire. I read those words and felt nothing at all. No anger, no satisfaction. Just an empty space where love used to be. I blocked her number without replying and put my phone away. But I wasn't done. 7 months earlier, Anna had told me to enjoy being poor. Now it was my turn to send a message, just not with words. The first thing I did with my new power was hire investigators and lawyers. Not to protect my money, but to expose the people who had tried to ruin me. Mark Reynolds had built his wealth on shaky ground, filled with questionable deals and near-illegal shortcuts. It took my team less than 3 weeks to uncover enough evidence to submit to the Securities and Exchange Commission, insider trading, market manipulation, fraudulent investment schemes. The man who had quietly destroyed my career had left behind a trail of crimes that no one had bothered to chase until now. Next, I purchased controlling stakes in 3 construction companies that regularly worked with Pierce Engineering. Then I made a call I had been waiting months to make. "Mr. Pierce, this is Ethan Cole," I said. "You might remember me. I'm the engineer you fired 7 months ago because Mark Reynolds played golf with you on weekends." There was silence on the line. I could hear him breathing. "I'm calling to inform you that Blackwood Holdings is terminating all contracts with your firm, effective immediately. I also wanted you to know that Mark Reynolds is currently under federal investigation for securities fraud. Information I personally submitted." He started mumbling about misunderstandings and tough business decisions. I cut him off. "Goodbye, Jonathan. I hope things work out for you better than they did for me." Mark Reynolds' investment firm collapsed within 4 months. Investors sued. Federal charges followed. His fortune vanished into legal fees and settlements. The man who took my wife and destroyed my career was left with nothing but debt and public disgrace. Anna had married Mark just 2 months after our divorce was finalized. She believed she had upgraded her life permanently, but when his empire fell apart, she found herself tied to a sinking ship. She filed for divorce 8 months later. I heard she moved back to Ohio to live with her sister. I never spoke to her again. I thought once about reaching out, not to reconcile, but to say something, to let her know I survived what she tried to do to me. But every time I considered it, I realized silence was stronger than any message. She would live the rest of her life knowing the man she dismissed as worthless became one of the richest people in the country. That truth would hurt her far more than anything I could ever say. The money changed my situation, but I refused to let it change who I was. I didn't buy a mansion, exotic cars, or any of the absurd things people assume billionaires want. Instead, I bought a simple 4-bedroom home in a quiet suburb outside Philadelphia. I hired a small, trusted team to manage my affairs, and I kept my life deliberately uncomplicated. Simplicity had already taught me what actually mattered. One of my first major decisions was donating $4 billion to the Blackwood Foundation. Samuel Blackwood had spent his life building something meant to outlive him, and I wanted to respect that purpose. The foundation expanded its work in education, healthcare, and poverty relief. I became personally involved in directing the funds, making sure the money reached people who truly needed it. My mother, Evelyn, moved into a lovely cottage near Valley Forge with the garden she had always dreamed about. I visit her every Sunday for dinner. She cooks pot roast and shares stories about my father that I had never heard before. Sometimes she still cries when she looks at me, unable to believe how far we've come from those dark days when I was cleaning floors and quietly questioning whether life was worth continuing. Last spring, I returned to City Memorial Hospital, not as a patient or a janitor, but as a donor. I gave $50 million to build a new wing dedicated to nursing, education, and patient care. They named it the Evelyn Cole Center for Nursing Excellence. When my mother saw her name on the building, she collapsed into my arms. It was the proudest moment of my life. Dr. Adrian Morales still works at the hospital. He's now the head of the emergency department, a promotion supported in part by my contributions. We have lunch together now and then. He once told me he almost didn't order the extra blood test the night I cut my hand. Something just told him to look deeper. I think about that often. How one small decision by a young doctor completely altered the course of my life. My brother Mark and I are closer than ever. His kids call me Uncle Ethan and beg me to tell them the story of how I went from cleaning bathrooms to inheriting billions. I give them a softened version, one that leaves out the betrayal and despair. They don't need to know about the nights I lay awake wondering if anyone would notice if I disappeared. They just need to know that their uncle didn't quit. I learned something during those darkest months that no amount of money could ever teach me. Your lowest moment is not your final moment. The night I lay on that hospital bed with blood soaking through my uniform, I had nothing, no career, no marriage, no hope. I was ready to give in to the darkness that had been pulling at me for months. But I kept showing up. I kept moving forward one step at a time, even when every step felt meaningless. I had no idea my blood carried a secret worth billions. I didn't know my father was the hidden son of one of America's richest families. All I knew was that giving up wasn't an option, because my mother raised me better than that, and my father taught me that character is built through endurance. The DNA in my veins didn't save me. The money didn't save me. Refusing to quit saved me. Showing up for that janitor job night after night saved me. Surviving when survival felt impossible saved me. Anna once said I wasn't ambitious enough. She was wrong. I wasn't ambitious for the things she valued. I was ambitious for something far greater. I was ambitious to remain a good man, even when the world gave me every reason to be bitter and broken. My father, Robert, never knew he was a Blackwood. He died believing he was just a factory worker's son leading a simple life. But he raised me with values no inheritance could provide. He taught me that honest work has dignity, that the people who love you are your real family, that blood is just biology. But character is a choice you make every single day. I am Ethan Blackwood Cole. I am a billionaire, an engineer, a son, a brother, and a man who once cleaned toilets for $11.50 an hour. I am all of those things because every experience shaped me into who I needed to become. I am living proof that your story isn't over until you decide it's over. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that hitting rock bottom isn't the end, then do something today. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. You never know who is quietly struggling and might be on the verge of their own breakthrough. Leave a comment about what part of this story impacted you the most. I read every single one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button and turn on notifications. We share inspiring stories every week that remind ordinary people that extraordinary things are possible. Thank you for watching all the way through. It means more than you know. I'll see you in the next story.